Have you seen the work of the artist Grant Haffner? He's got some amazing stuff. The thing that draws me to his art are the bold, bright colors and the really strong use of lines to create movement through his pictures. He usually uses perspective, 1-point perspective specifically, to really make it look like you can go right on the road or wherever he's taking you, right into the picture. So today I wanted to be inspired by some artwork done by Grant Haffner, and I'm going to be using watercolor. You could also use marker for this. That might work well too, but definitely some small lines. And then I'm also going to be using some Sharpies, thin point Sharpies in particular. And this is the one that I made just like the style of Grant Haffner. So I started off with this really bright, streaky sky, which is very similar to what he does in his. And then I added the 1-point perspective here with the telephone poles. And then of course, like all of the stuff on the ground too. So you can kind of see that nice vibrant feel and that sense of movement into the picture. So if you want to see how I did it, follow along and you can make a picture similar to the style of Grant Haffner as well.
Grant Haffner was born in 1978 in Berkeley, California, but the artist was mostly raised in East Hampton, New York. His current art studio is located in Northeast Pennsylvania. Grant Haffner was a resident of Long Island's East End for most of his life. His images are still inspired by and reflect the country roads, flat landscapes, and surrounding water that he would absorb while traveling the area in his pickup truck. His signature motif of utility poles and the open road create an original sense of movement and depth to his distinctive compositions. Today we're going to use 1-point perspective to make art inspired by Grant Haffner. I'm going to begin by starting a little bit lower than halfway down my watercolor paper, and I'm going to make a line using a ruler and a pencil. This is going to be my horizon line. Now, somewhere along this line, I need a vanishing point. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a spot, it doesn't have to be in the middle, to make my vanishing point. From that point, I'm going to make a line that's diagonal that goes to the bottom of my paper. This is going to be one side of my road. I'm going to do the same thing somewhere else. It really doesn't matter where you choose, and it doesn't have to be centered. Now I do want the line centered in my road, so I am going to try to pick the center spot on the bottom of my paper, and I'm going to make the line that goes down the center of my road where the stripes would be. And I'm going to add a line right there, actually 2 lines to make it look like a stripe. Now I also want a little bit of excitement on either side of my road. So I'm going to add some other lines using my ruler. They always go to my vanishing point, and those will add some excitement either side of my road. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm holding my ruler. I'm always lining it up with that vanishing point because then it will look like 1-point perspective. I'm going to do that all the way up to my horizon line. So you can see I've got this sense of movement. All of these lines push you towards that vanishing point. Now I thought it would be nice to maybe have some distant hills or mountains. So I'm going to go ahead and just lightly draw an indication of some distant hills or mountains. You could also maybe make a distant city or maybe some distant trees, but I'm trying to keep it simple. The other thing I want to make sure to include in my picture are some telephone poles, and I can decide which side I want to put them on. I think I'm going to go with the right side. The first telephone pole is going to be nice and tall, way over by the side of my paper. Then I'm going to make a very light line that goes from the top of the pole down to my vanishing point, and that will tell me where my other poles need to go, because they all should go down towards the vanishing point of my project. Notice that as they get farther and farther away, they should be getting smaller and smaller. So I can start with maybe 3. I could always add more. And then I'm also going to add a T, like a horizontal line at the top of the telephone poles to make them look like telephone poles. So you can do that too. I'm making mine a little bit below the top so it looks like a short or a lowercase T. I've decided I want to do maybe a couple more telephone poles. If for some reason you're having a hard time making them perfectly vertical, that's okay too. A lot of times telephone poles aren't perfectly vertical. Maybe the wind has really done a number on them, or they've moved for some reason or other. So if you have a crooked one here or there, that's okay. All right, there's my basic drawing. I'm really liking how it's looking. If you want to, you can go ahead and draw the actual telephone lines from pole to pole, or you can just wait and do that with Sharpie later. But I'm just making a slight curve to the lines, and I'm connecting both sides of my telephone poles with telephone lines. It's up to you too. If you would like to add some telephone poles on the left side of your picture as well, go for it. Either way works. I decided to make my hill a little bit taller on the left just to help balance out my picture with all of the excitement on the right. All right, now I'm going to put down my pencil and my ruler, and I'm going to get ready to add some paint. Now, Grant Haffner uses some bold streaks of color all the way across his sky, and they could be any colors. I've seen even greens and purples and grays in the sky too. I've seen skies that are bright orange. He says he's inspired by the sunrises, and if you've ever seen a sunrise, you know it can be so many different colors. So I'm going to start with yellow because it's so nice and bright, and I'm just going to streak some color across my sky. Then I'm going to use my brush to streak some pink into my yellow. Now, as you're streaking colors into your sky, try to make sure that your colors at least blend well. For example, I wouldn't put orange and blue right on top of each other or streak them together because that would give us brown, and we probably don't want brown in the sky. So try to avoid those complementary colors like red and green right next to each other, orange and blue, purple and yellow, maybe use another color in between them. Yellow and pink work great together because if they do happen to mix, they'll make some shades of orange. And I'm going to put my blue way up here. I don't want too much green, so I'm trying to keep it from touching the yellow too much. So definitely keep that in mind. I'm not overly blending my picture too because I want my streaks to be nice and strong. So I'm just trying to use my brush, streak the color in, and then move on so that I've got a nice striped sky, just in like the style of Grant Haffner. I feel like I need a little bit brighter color, so I'm trying to use a little bit less water and a little bit more paint. The more paint you use, the brighter your colors will be. So I really want to try to make my colors nice and bright. Now, I'm using watercolor for this, but you could also use tempera paint, acrylic paint, whatever you have. Trying to get nice streaked sky. Notice my streaks go all the way from one side of my picture to the other. And when I get to a good point with these streaks, I'm going to try to let them dry somewhat before I dive into the other parts of my painting. But I'm liking how those are looking. I'm going to stop touching the sky and just leave it streaked. Now, the next thing I want to start on is my road, and I actually could do this while my painting in the sky is drying. The road, I want to make a normal road color, so maybe a gray or a gray mixed with purple actually would make it a little bit more interesting. You could even add some streaks on the road if you want to. I've definitely seen that on some of Grant Haffner's inspired paintings. And I'm just going to try to fill in those triangles to make my road. If I want my paint darker, I use less water and really try to get more paint out of my watercolor sets. Now the watercolors I'm using are in this tray right here that I got. I just buy tubed watercolors and I pour them in and then kind of let them harden and reuse them just by adding water. But any watercolors or tempera or acrylic would work. I'm going to continue adding color here to this road, trying to make sure I got a nice, smooth triangle filled with color. Notice I'm trying to stay away from that center line because I do want to make it yellow later. So yellow wouldn't cover up the purplish color very well. And now I've got my road filled in, and just having this shape going down to that vanishing point really draws your eye into the picture, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now I'm going to let this dry and the sky dry before I add some of the other elements so that all of my colors don't just mix and blend together. Now for the ground, I am going to be adding some watercolor paint in bright colors in all of these different triangles that go towards my vanishing point. You could also use washable markers for this step and then just add a little bit of water to them later. Sometimes that can help, especially towards that vanishing point when it gets extra tiny. I find though that a flat brush really works just fine getting into some of those tight spots. I'm also going to do the line down the center of the road. It's important to wait till the road is dry so that it doesn't just bleed with the color there. I'm going to add some yellows, some greens, maybe some blues, whatever colors I choose to add around my road. And remember, you are the artist, so if you would like to choose some other colors like pinks or oranges or reds, please be my guest. I'm going to try to stick with colors that can blend a little bit just in case as I paint them they accidentally mix, and it's really not a big deal if there's a little bit of mixing going on between some of these lines. I will be adding some extra lines just to kind of help strengthen the area between them. But for now, I'm just using some yellows, some greens. This is kind of a darker greenish blue. Anything that I can think of to fill in all of these areas around the road and to help draw that eye all the way back to that vanishing point far away. It just gives this painting such a nice sense of movement. I'm going to keep on adding until my entire area below my horizon line is full of color, and I want to make sure that I don't have any white of my paper still showing through, so I'm trying to get that all filled in. And then I'm also going to think about adding some color up where my little mountains are. So if you decided to add something above your horizon line, distant mountains, a distant city, whatever it may be, you could also paint that. But I'm trying to kind of leave it a little bit lighter so it looks like it's farther back into the distance. All right, I'm liking how this is looking. The next thing I want to do is I'm just going to use some strong color to kind of trace over my pencil lines with paint. I feel like that adds just some extra stripes into my my foreground here, and it just kind of brings that eye to that vanishing point. So I'm just using kind of a darkish blue-green and maybe even a yellow here, and just trying to trace over some of my lines in between my colors, just to add a couple extra lines. All right, I let my painting dry because it's very important to have dry paint before we do these Sharpie lines. And now I want to go ahead and trace all of my telephone poles to make them stand out. You may want to make the closer telephone poles a little bit wider or fatter than the ones farther away because they would be thicker being closer to you. So I am trying to make mine a little bit wider as they get closer to the foreground. The ones that are larger should be a little bit fatter than the ones that are farther away. So just kind of keep that in mind. when you are adding the Sharpie to maybe add a little bit of extra width to those that are closer to you. But I'm thinking this is really coming together. I'm liking how it's looking, and hopefully you're liking how yours is looking as well. I'm going to go ahead and add the actual telephone lines connecting each of the poles. Notice you can make them kind of sagging down a little bit in the middle, but they should still kind of follow that line of perspective. And maybe even I'll throw a couple other little ones way off in the distance. And that is a masterpiece. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed creating some artwork inspired by the style of Grant Haffner. And please like and subscribe down below my channel, Elke Art. I love sharing art with you, and I hope you enjoy doing it with me. Hope to see you again soon. Have a good one.